Oh, Rick! Rick just got fucking decimated. Here, I get on one truck, you get on the other. No!
Wait, no way.
Oh my god! Hey y'all, Renegades here. And again, like, I'm sorry, I can't help but do that.
You can't help yourself.
What? It's Scott the freaking Waz, dude. Scott is always gonna be someone that I can just like gravitate to because I enjoy his takes on stuff. And also I just enjoy, actually, you know what? I meant to show you this a little bit earlier, but check this out. When we're watching Scott the Waz, I figured, hey, what better time to whip this out than now? Got the
cool.
Google lights. I got the Google lights down here. And let's see. Let's get this turned up. We're a little bit brighter. There we go.
Dude,
so yeah, we're I can actually change this back whenever the hell I want. So yeah, I can actually it's like if we want to go Renegade Red, it's just like there we go. Yeah. But while we're doing Scott the Waz, I figured
fitting.
There we go. That's blue. That's the blue we're looking for.
Sonic colors.
Exactly. And let's see if we match the border. Well, close enough. We're pretty close. We're pretty close to the Scott the Waz.
Maybe he'll notice us.
Oh gosh, maybe.
That's the comment I'm fishing for.
Yeah, Scott the Waz. All of a sudden, he's just like, why are you guys reacting to me? There's so much more interesting stuff out there on the internet. It's like, don't you say that, Scott. You are amazing. You are a great creator, and you deserve so much love. You deserve 10 million subs, bud.
Love above.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, we got Scott the Waz, Rise, Fall, and Rise of 2D Gaming. I think he's going to talk about, like, Shovel Knight, stuff like that. You know,
I'm sure.
like the resurrection of, like, 2D gaming after it left. And you know, people realize,
What was
yeah.
that hand-drawn side-scroller?
Oh,
It was
Cuphead.
Like the Vita. No. It was like the Fox of Nine Tails or whatever.
Oh, Okami Den?
Yeah, I think so.
No. That was something else. That was Okami Den is the prequel to Okami, which is illustration game where you're this wolf Matarasu.
I think that's the one that I'm talking about.
Well, it's not a 2D side scroller.
Oh.
It's a 3D like action like platformer.
What am I talking about? You like this Fox thing, and it's like a Japanese game, and it's been ported over to a bunch of shit.
Wait. No, it's a...
No, that is not the one that I'm talking about.
Yeah, because the original Okami, that one is that one's one of my favorite like artistic games. Hideki Kamiya, yeah. Also, I'm sad that Clover Studios is still closed down. Damn it, I really the studio that made it, Beautiful Joe, bunch of really good games. Like Beautiful Joe, that's one that's a 2D, 2D-esque side scroller. Yeah, and I know what you mean.
That kind of thing.
I love that stuff.
That stuff stuck around, but wasn't the maximum like main attraction that it was in the beginning.
No. But yeah, I know. But 2D gaming has made a hell of a resurrection, or made a hell of a comeback. Because hell, Nick was up late playing Blasphemous, which is this amazing, like, very dark Castlevania-esque game, and Jesus, I watched him play some of it, and I want to play it. It's
Nicky's playing Limbo right now.
Yeah, Limbo. That's another great 2D. It's they consider those games 2.5D because it takes place in a 3D environment, but you're only able to move on a 2D plane. Yeah, and I still love that. I mean, there's stuff that you notice in the background, stuff like that, and the backgrounds and foregrounds are a lot more active than normal 2D games. But yeah, I mean, I remember when Limbo came out, dude. I remember I was living in the trailer with Clint. Yes. At that time when it originally released, and I downloaded it onto my Xbox 360. That one right there. Yeah. And I remembered after it took for hell and ever for that thing to download onto my friggin' Xbox. But after it downloaded, I played through that game like 3 or 4 times. Shit. I couldn't stop myself. I was like, this game's so beautiful. This game's amazing. I love it. It's 2D. Fuck. Yeah. Like, it blew my mind with, like the possibilities of 2D and, like, what all was left discovered. Because, you know, whenever everything moved to 3D, everyone's like, oh, well, 2D games are dead now.
Yeah, that's old technology pretty much.
Yeah, basically. Everyone's just like, oh, we live in a 3D world now. No one wants to play 2D games anymore. I beg to differ. And here we are now. And 2D games are more than relevant. They're actually, in a lot of ways, the superior style of games in some ways.
Yeah,
for some people, yeah. And I wonder what Scott's got to say about all this. We got this up on screen. Let's give it a watch.
Hey y'all, Scott here.
Hi,
You
Scott.
ever stare in front of the mirror and practice what you're about to say to somebody? Hey, you know what they say? Go yourself. Well, I'm practicing what to say to family reunion.
I say that to myself every morning in the mirror.
Yeah.
Except I add a little bit more to it. I'm just like, I just like look at myself. I'm like, look at you, you fat piece of shit. I'm sorry.
Coming up, they'd probably say, oh, Scott, it's been so long, talk to me. And I'd go, Dimensions, oh, my favorite. You know, 2D just kind of happened. Nobody went, flat plane, no Z-axis. People have always been after that, their third dimension. It's the future and the solution to all your problems in marriage. These never work. The dimension of our dreams, and when we finally got it, I miss garbage. I mean, we could go back before 2D gaming to no D.
Oh.
These were the days. Who are we kidding? It's always been a battle
Bubsy.
between 2D and 3D. You could argue 4D gaming is something like virtual reality, but I will categorize 4D like movies and theme park rides do. If my chair moves, that's the fourth dimension. Maybe someday we'll get a true fourth dimension in gaming, but for now we gotta settle for Frogger 3D being the farthest we can go. These days, it's 2D and 3D living in harmony. But it wasn't always like this.
No.
At least on home consoles. It seemed like for a second there that 2D was merely a product of hardware limitations. The only reason to make a 2D game is if you're making it for Game Boy or something. If you were making a game for the PlayStation 2, GameCube, or Xbox, you knew what dimension to make it. 3D was kind of seen as the new norm for modern console
Ratchet
games.
and Clank,
but now
yeah.
that status has been changed by Kirby Star Allies. 2D
When there's amazing 3D like platformers like Ratchet and Clank, Jack and Daxter, Rayman, you know, games like that, yeah, I mean, of course you're going to want to leap into the third dimension.
Right.
But again, you know, you're abandoning an entire genre, and there's so much left in the tank.
games
so much.
are everywhere, sitting right alongside 3D ones, but
retro-esque
this way.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, 2D games just kind of happened. Do you really think there was a board meeting?
Graphics.
This was just what video games were at the time. This was the extent of what could be done, but 3D was still the dream of many. What if these characters weren't flat? They could walk around in a world, not just some kind of stage play. For 2D games, the top-down perspective was usually the answer to prayers like that, but everything was still so flat, and there were only so many things you could do and places you could go.
One of the
At
greatest
time, though,
RPGs of all time.
This was perfectly fine. But then gunshots were heard. Super Mario 64 defined 3D gaming. It existed beforehand, but did it? Most 3D games had a hearty dose of quotation marks involved. They definitely were more 3D than not, but too many 2D elements were involved to truly make them feel like there's no going back from this. Sonic 3D Blast. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Wolfenstein 3D and Doom laid the
why
foundation
not?
for a modern first-person shooter utilizing 3D
Oh yeah,
environments. And consoles
for Wolfenstein. I remember everyone saying, "Oh, Doom is like," but Wolfenstein was actually first.
Yeah.
Everyone forgets that. I remember playing Wolfenstein on, I remember playing it with Richie and Zach on like way back in the day, man. I actually came out of the holler to play that one.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, me and Zach were there and we watched Richie play it. Richie's just like, can't kill that guy. And me and Zach were just like, well, why don't you try this? And then he did it, and he was like, wow, yeah, actually pretty smart. It's like, hey, we play video games. I mean, me and Zach, like, we were raised on like Super Nintendo and like an NES, so we can understand like game strategies a little bit.
Right.
Richie was very lateral with his approach. He's just like, I go in there and I shoot him, and he don't die. It's like, well, I mean, use the pillars, use the corners, you know, whenever he fires at you, just go around the corners. Eventually he killed Hitler. Good job, Richie.
dabbled in 3D games prior, the PlayStation and Sega Saturn helped popularize them as a standard.
Yeah.
These consoles did 2D games a bit better. A system like the Sega Saturn wasn't designed around 3D gaming. It was supposed to be a 2D sprite powerhouse with 3D effects for the backgrounds and such. But they saw the writing on the Christ! If your console wasn't capable of playing 3D games, well, Thanksgiving's gonna be
Siphon
awkward.
filter.
This was where the industry was heading, but even though all these 3D games were releasing, they weren't fully taking advantage of this new dimension. They almost felt like 2D games at their core, just with 3D models instead of sprites. Oh, some games just use 3D models but stuck to a 2D perspective. But in came Mario 64, showing just how game design had to evolve. It wasn't the first 3D game, but it might as well have been. It was a monumental moment for gaming. I should know, I wasn't there. But have you noticed around this time, 2D became somewhat of a product of limitations? It almost felt like 3D replaced 2D, and 2D became relegated to handhelds because that's all they could do. Most flagship gaming franchises during this time felt the need to transition to 3D, and 2D was seen as old news. The only person that would care about them would be Lincoln, and he's dead! Of course, I'm mainly referring to game series that used to be 2D adventures, which evolved when 3D was becoming widely utilized. Something like Dr. Mario 64, it makes sense as to why it's just a simple 2D puzzle game, but out of all the action-adventure titles released on the Nintendo 64, I can only think of a handful of games played from a 2D perspective. Yoshi's Story, Mischief Makers, Kirby 64, you have Super Smash Bros. And other fighting games, that's pretty much it. If you wanted 2D Mario, Zelda, or Donkey Kong, you had to play those on Game Boy. It really felt like Nintendo was pushing most games to just be 3D on the 64, which does make me wonder why they kept Yoshi and Kirby 2D during this time. Well, they still used 3D graphics, but kept the playing field 2D. You can only go left, right, up, or down, which created the term 2.5D. What's half a Z?
It's a fixed. It's not like okay. The first game I can think of that used the 2.5D element was Link to the Past, because keep in mind you could go up and down in levels and enemies could fly over top of you, stuff like that, and you moved in sort of a 3D way. You got knocked down the pit and you had to work your way back up. Again, the whole thing with I think the biggest aspect with Kirby and with Yoshi was that they wanted to maintain the storybook aspect. I think they wanted to maintain that. In order to do that, they felt a 2D story for kids, would be a more equatable thing than like a full 3D adventure where you have full control over Yoshi or Kirby. But anyway, sorry.
It's a 2D game with 3D graphics, or a 3D game played from a 2D perspective. Dead. Pay attention. The PlayStation and Sega Saturn kept 2D games on consoles alive during this era, and this is where we got some of the most gorgeous sprite art ever conceived. It was brilliantly mixed with visual effects and backgrounds that only these new systems could achieve, and showed that 2D gaming wasn't just a step towards 3D. They were two different beasts deserving the same amount of attention. This is the era I'm talking about when I refer to the fall of 2D gaming. The PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, and Dreamcast. If you were making a game for these platforms, it was almost certainly 3D, and if you wanted to make a 2D game, get in the car. 2D games were seen as for handhelds only, and by proxy, less important than the big 3D console games. Case in point, all of these franchises that originated in 2D all got games during this generation. Not a single console entry was 2D. Now, of course, what's the big deal? The 2D games didn't go away. You got those games on the handheld. It's like this label. What's there to question? What is this, moonshine or porn? Your 2D games never left. You just had to play them on the handheld. But because of that, they didn't feel like they were considered as important as what was on the consoles. Console games have always been the priority. Sure, you got 2 Zelda games on the Nintendo DS in between console entries, but literally every time people talk about the history of Zelda games, they always say, Twilight Princess came out, then Skyward Sword. It's almost like handheld games were treated as spin-offs sometimes, even if they had just as much, if not more integrity as whatever released on consoles. But in the end, they just weren't considered as important as console games. These handheld titles sold more than their console counterparts, but you'll barely hear people talk about the portable games. It's all about the home console ones. It's something that's always perplexed me. I always see Nintendo, Sega, Capcom, Sony pull from their classic home console games for nostalgia bait, but barely ever do so with their handheld titles by comparison. Well, I guess it's because normally console games get the bigger budgets, the bigger teams, and the bigger scopes because they can handle experiences of that size, and thus they're the bigger deals. Portable systems couldn't do as much, so budgets for games were generally smaller, and thus people generally saw games that released on handhelds as lesser and not as important than the console games. Grand Theft Auto Advance released the same day as San Andreas. Guess what happened? Most of the time, handheld variants of these series would be put in sub-series with
Chains of Olympus.
Yeah, Chains of Olympus was a big one for the PSP.
Yeah, Chains of Olympus and Ghosts of Sparta. A lot of people I played both of them on PSP. Both of them were really well done. I mean, they did a really good job transporting all of that, all that was in the God of War games, like the mainline ones, into those. Yeah. And I liked the story. I dug the stories a lot. But again, everyone only mentions mainly the the 3 main, or now 4 main ones, soon to be 5th one, which I'm excited. I saw the trailer for the 5th one, and I'm just like, oh, give it to me. I've got a PS5. I want to play it now. But yeah, sorry.
The console entries being direct sequels to one another. Basically, the most a lot of these handhelds could get would be prequels, side stories, etc. Systems like the Game Boy Advance could do some very light 3D stuff, but 2D was where it was most comfortable, so this was how 2D lived on at the time. Though with everything I said earlier about handhelds were home to the lesser experiences, it made 2D gaming feel unimportant. If any generation made this style feel like just a simple stepping stone to 3D, it was this one. I mean, previously you got games like Castlevania Symphony of the Night on PlayStation.
Arguably the greatest
like
2D platformer ever.
You had to play it on the Game Boy Advance because the type of Castlevania game you got on consoles during that era was this. 2D games were relegated to the Game Boy Advance because that's all it could realistically do, and with these games being cheaper, smaller titles on weaker hardware, 2D was seen as inherently worth less than 3D. Now, that doesn't mean 2D was completely off the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Adventures on GameCube had a graphical style incredibly reminiscent of A Link to the Past on SNES, though now with all kinds of effects and crumbs on the screen. Looking at reviews, critics liked a lot about it. Outside of the graphics. A series that consistently were 2D only skipped main entries on consoles during this time. Classic Mega Man, Kirby, Yoshi, and when they wanted to do something like a new Mega Man X game, X7 was this new experiment bringing the series into 3D, with the next entry showing us just how well that turned out. X8 brought things back to a 2D perspective, releasing around 2005, which is where the rise of 2D started to occur. Xbox Live Arcade initially started out on the original Xbox, hosting games on the likes of arcade classics and some original very simple games. You could download these games for a relatively small price, but when it made its way over to the Xbox 360, it
Mr.
blew
Explosion, man.
up. Xbox Live Arcade became a breeding ground for smaller, bite-sized games.
And that's why, like, everyone fell in love with the 360, dude, because the 360 had the Xbox Live Arcade. That's what won them the console war that time around. And, you know, again, dude,
They've been killing it with that kind of stuff.
Well, they were for the longest time, but then they got greedy. Not Phil Spencer, but Don Matrick got greedy and was just like, we're going to make, you know, the Xbox the entertainment hub of the house. And I'm like, why would people buy an Xbox when smart TVs are a thing? Like, why? If you want to make the Xbox a streaming box, like, no. I mean, you want to prioritize gamers because they're the ones that made your console sell. Like, if you want to identify with, like, the big overall market, okay, include that with it, but don't punish gamers. Do not punish the people that brought you to the dance. All right? That's,
Well, they've done a great service to us now.
Well, okay. That's the thing. Ever since Don Matrick left and Phil Spencer has come in, yeah, they have actually done really good. But yet, the stink that Don Matrick left behind has been a hell of a road to get over because, you know, basically when you tell gamers, yeah, we're going to punish you if you don't log on at least once every day. Oh, and not only that, but you're going to have to pay a premium for used games.
Oof.
Which, as soon as Sony came out and said, your games are yours, and if you want to give them to your friends, you can give them to your friends. As soon as they said that and just outright bitch slapped, like, Microsoft, I mean...
Now they're like, oh yeah, you can play your old games, but you gotta pay us.
Yeah.
It's kind of flipped.
It's flipped now, and now Microsoft, they've done this, like, they're allowing people to play games
backlog of about 20 years.
Yeah, like, if you own the game, then you can play it. They learned their lesson. It's just now they're having to play catch up. Yeah. And Microsoft is playing the long game with, like, the Xbox Game Pass, which I asked Quinn. Quinn said that they want to buy a Xbox Series S now because the Game Pass is too good of a deal to pass up.
It's so good.
And also the backwards compatibility, which Quinn, unbelievably, is just like, yeah, I've got a bunch of old, like, Xbox games.
I've been loving it. Personally.
Oh yeah, your Series X that you got. I'm glad that you're still enjoying it, dude.
I'd use it. Like right now, I'm even thinking about porting my GTA Online character over to the Xbox, just so I can actually mod the PC version and not care.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been enjoying the fuck out of it.
Let's get back to this.
As classic arcade titles, it helped create a market for simple, cheap experiences on a home console. Much like how the pick-up-and-play games worked well on handhelds,
yeah, I love
they worked
Peggle.
just as well as downloadable games on the TV, as you could just hop into them, play them for a bit, and hop out without
Cloudberry
swapping
Kingdom.
discs. This
Still never
was
beat
a
that.
godsend for retro stuff, making the classics easily accessible to the masses. Instantly downloadable, the games were smaller in file size and simpler due to their age, which made them perfect to just always
Fruit
have at a moment's
Ninja.
notice on
Oh,
our
God.
360s.
Frogger.
And I think this got people to realize,
Simpsons
wow,
Arcade.
this isn't dog shit. 2D retro-styled games still had a place on the home consoles. There's merit to these games existing right alongside the big bombastic 3D ones. So original downloadable games were starting to get pumped out for the marketplace,
yes.
some of which were retro reboots of classics, others completely new concepts. All for affordable prices. If you haven't played Peggle because of budget constraints, that's your fault.
The bank is repossessing my body.
And I think the boom of downloadable smaller games
Super
showed
Meat
how much
Boy,
value
hell
these
yeah.
titles still had. A game like Bionic Commando Rearmed was far more popular than the big, gritty Bionic Commando reboot it was fundamentally made to advertise. 2D games like this were finally making a comeback on consoles, though they were still being seen as worth less than 3D ones. The Xbox Live Arcade era really messed up my perception of price points, as back then they would charge like $10 for a new Space Invaders. Now it's like, I know it's in a collection, but still, it makes me look at something like Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection, that released in 2021, for $30 digitally. And I'm not saying it's not worth it. I'm saying the unbelievably cheap prices of digital games from this era makes me initially look at this as overpriced. 2D games were still seen as inferior in value to 3D titles. In fact, that just goes for various things in general during this era. Downloadable games were seen as lesser than retail games. Indie games were worse than AAA ones because they would always denote on storefronts that this was an indie game, this was an Xbox Live Arcade or PlayStation Network or WiiWare game. And thankfully, eventually, they just said, why are we giving these games labels? They're all just games at the end of the day. Who cares if it doesn't have a retail presence? Who cares if it was just made by one person? They should all be given the same label, not, oh, well, this is just a downloadable only game, or, oh, this is an indie game. How about, these are all Xbox 360 games? And I think that mindset helped 2D games in the long run, as they were primed for indie development. 2D is easier and cheaper to develop at its core and in general compared to 3D. Now, because of that, you may say, well, then obviously that's why the perceived value of a 2D game was lower, because they're easier and cheaper to make. And for some reason, people keep pushing that old deal out. Because it's 2D, it should be cheaper. It's easier to make than a 3D game. Yeah, okay, look up the most expensive and difficult to make movies of all time. Chances are they're the same price to watch as the Poltergeist of Borley Forest. I guess movies may be a weird comparison. I think a comparison people don't make enough are actual games. With 3D games, there's more that can go wrong.
Mousetrap.
2D is more grounded. There's only so many possibilities. 3D, there's more to take into account, adding to developmental issues. But from what I've seen, due to that, 3D games have so much more fluff, more cutscenes, boring tutorials, parts of the gameplay that are just you walking and following somebody and doing nothing else. It doesn't really matter.
Now, here's the thing. I can understand the reason why it's like that. The cinematic nature of games nowadays, you know, of like 3D big budget games, they incorporate the cinematic stuff in to like bring in more casual people and to bring in and to keep people enticed.
Right.
And for most people, like for most like gamers, they're okay with that. But there's some gamers that want, you know, just instantly get in there and just start playing.
Right.
Start playing the game. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the main deal that I think Scott's raising here. And I agree with it to a certain degree, but whenever cinematics like enhance the gameplay, I think it's okay to do that.
Yeah.
I have full control of what I do and where I go in this environment. If there's nothing to do and nowhere to go, I'm just holding up here. A lot of these 3D games like to give you the illusion of being much more than what they really are. 2D, you can't do that as much because it's more obvious when you do it. You can't bullshit as much as you can with 3D games. And I know this sounds like I prefer 2D, and no, I like both of these equally, but as more and more time passes, it's easier and easier to call 3D games out on their garbage. Like the first time this little narrow hallway passage thing happened, I thought nothing of it, but the 60th game that did it this year? It's obvious this is here to not only mask loading screens, but also increase the time spent playing the game, even if it's only by a few seconds. Which making...
Also, the Yggdrasil trail in God of War was another one that for them to hide the loading screen. Because just like they're in there and Mimir starts telling a story, or Kratos starts telling Atreus a story, and it's just like, okay, where's the door? Oh, loading screen. Okay. And at least they do that rather than, you know, just like It's like you just walking around in there, and you're just like, there's nothing to, nothing to take in.
Making any game that lasts hundreds of hours, it's tough. But in a 3D world, you have more space to do more things. A 2D experience can only be consumed in so many ways, which I think adds to the perception that a 2D game is worth less than a 3D one. So regardless of 2D games coming back to consoles in a more substantial way, they were still seen as games that could only be $20 or less. However, I think the main company pushing forward, trying to give 2D games the same value as any other AAA release, is Nintendo. For a while there, Nintendo sort of pushed their 2D games off to their handhelds, which again, devalued them a bit. If you wanted 2D Zelda or Mario, you mostly had to get a Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, but even then, with Mario, from 1992 to 2006, there were no original 2D games produced. They just did remakes and re-releases on the portables, which it's crazy to think there was a time when 2D Mario was basically extinct. What Nintendo did instead was invest heavily into the Wario Land series. That was their premier 2D platformer for a bit, but in 2006, Nintendo revitalized 2D Mario with New Super Mario Bros. On DS. It was a sales juggernaut and helped prove that there was still a big audience for original 2D games.
Also, IGN's review, it has a little something for everyone. That's what they say every time. It's like, has a little something for everyone. Too much water, 7.8 out of 10. Thanks, IGN.
With the casual appeal of systems like the DS and Wii, it became more apparent than ever how many non-gamers understood 2D gaming far more than 3D. 3D, you have to worry about a camera system, and it's like, f*** you, I already have a mortgage to deal with. A game like the original Super Mario Bros., most players could deal with. Hell, many found it fun. Super Mario 64?
Join the occult, Dad!
While millions experienced and enjoyed video games,
if I ever did that to my dad, he would have beat the shit out of me.
Wasn't just an evolutionary step to take to
Join
get to
the cult,
3D.
Dad.
It was something that was preferable in many ways to millions. It was simpler to understand for casual players, and as great as 3D was, it was too different from 2D to be considered a replacement. I think some people almost looked at going from 2D to 3D gaming as the transition from black and white to color and film. The 2D was mostly relegated to systems that just couldn't do 3D. But in reality, revitalizing 2D games was the ticket to grow gaming that much more. While the Nintendo DS could do 3D games, most of the major titles released on it were still 2D, even if they used 3D character models. And on the Wii, Nintendo started to pump more and more money into AAA 2D console games. This all started with Super Paper Mario in 2007, reimagining the Paper Mario RPG series as a 2D platformer with RPG elements and a gimmick showing you the 3D perspective of your 2D plane. Or maybe it didn't start it, but it showed where Nintendo was heading with many of its key franchises. Backwards! Nintendo has always been a very nostalgia-heavy company. Many times they theme their games around, remember that? But that doesn't mean there can't be any innovation with their nostalgia-heavy titles. Their next major 2D console game was Wario Land Shake It, also known as Wario Land The Shake Dimension in Europe. It's offensive over there. Wario Land didn't do much sales-wise, but it was a gorgeous 2D platformer on a console with great cutscenes, artwork, and animation. It was clear more time and money were being
spent on games.
Even if the title didn't sell well, the intention was there. This was the first Wario Land on a console.
Rule 34, man.
Rule 34. Like it. We got Wario World on the GameCube, a 3D Wario platform.
It's Nintendo fucking mainline, just out there in the open. They're making it canon.
Yep.
Wario, Tutti Frutti Booty.
Wario is thick.
Thick Wario is just Wario.
Yeah, Wario super thick.
Yeah.
God, sorry.
He comes standard with thick.
Yeah. Wario is down with the thickness. I was gonna, get up, come on, get down with the thickness. I'm sorry.
But Wario Land Shake It was traditional 2D as all hell, which was an important precedent to set, because 1 year later, Nintendo went all in on 2D console gaming with New Super Mario Bros. Wii. I remember my aunt wanted a Wii because, well, I loved Super Mario Bros. It clicked perfectly with the Wii's casual appeal. In an old school Super Mario Bros. Game, a title like Mario Galaxy, you're gonna give Grandma a stroke with that. It didn't matter that it wasn't as visually.
I still want
appealing or
Mario
epic
Galaxy
and
3, damn it.
The biggest games on the market at the time. New Super Mario Bros. Wii proved that people wanted simple 2D fun on their TVs just as much as on their handhelds. Plus, Nintendo introduced simultaneous multiplayer with this game, which became a staple in their modern 2D titles to come. Next year, we got Donkey Kong Country Returns and Kirby's Epic Yarn on Wii. Kirby's Return to Dreamland the next, and coupled with the Wii's downloadable library of old school NES and SNES games, retro-style new downloadable WiiWare titles, and the lower cost of developing games on it compared to Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, the Wii became the go-to console for the resurrection of 2D console gaming. Nintendo definitely noticed that these 2D titles appeal to far more consumers than ever before. You satisfy the casual crowd with simpler games they can understand. The hardcore community is pleased by the return to the classic era of gaming. Pop a multiplayer mode on there and all's forgiven. So because of this, Nintendo made another 2D game. And another 2D game. And another. 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 And another.
Nintendo leaned too far into 2D gaming after the success of New Super Mario Bros. Wii. It just felt like they took their 3D games and pushed them off to the side. And even when they did do 3D games, they took too much inspiration from the 2D ones.
The Wii U and 3DS, frankly, had too much 2D. From 2012 to 2016, it almost felt like every other game Nintendo was making was a 2D platformer. And they're great, but my god! We went from not enough of them to too much just like that. And you know what? I get it. These 2D games were obviously a smart move because 1, they had wider appeal, and 2, they were definitely easier to develop. Like, why wouldn't you make the game that'll cost less to produce and make more money? But that's the problem. Many of these didn't feel like artistic decisions made because they wanted to make a 2D game. They felt like business decisions. Make a 2D game because it's more cost effective. And with a mindset like that, many of the 2D games that came out this generation, while crazy fun, weren't necessarily exciting in terms of what they represented. They felt like another Nintendo game, and that's it. Which I think this was one of the factors that led to Nintendo's underperformance during this generation. The 2D games have wide appeal, but generally speaking, they don't leave the same impact as a 3D one. Nintendo's 2D output felt safe, not cutting edge, but when they would put out a 3D game, they'd knock it out of the park, which just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth concerning their output of 2D platformers. Because it's obvious they can be so much more. Just look at what indies are doing. Some of the most ingenious concepts to ever grace gaming are coming from just a few people working on their own, and they're being put into 2D titles. And thankfully, the industry started to evolve. What used to be considered just indie games have become games. Some of the biggest modern successes in the industry come from them, and many of which are 2D games. Ones that take inspiration from what studios did years ago. Games that they just aren't as willing to put too much time, effort, and money into anymore.
That's one Nick
And these
played.
indie developers help to prove that some genres never die. Just because Castlevania and Metroid gave up for a while there doesn't mean there isn't a market for classic Castlevania and Metroid games like this anymore. The Xbox One's most iconic exclusive, in my opinion, was Cuphead. Donkey Kong Country came back with returns on Wii and Tropical Freeze on Wii U after the series was just in a dormant state of spin-offs and re-releases, and it came back to glowing reviews and great sales. These types of games always have a place in the market.
Well, it helps when you have retro
Handhelds
studios
and consoles
developing
becoming one.
the game for you.
We've seen far more games that normally would have probably released on something like the Nintendo 3DS now appear on the Nintendo Switch alongside games like Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey.
Well, it's because basically Nintendo has combined the handheld aspect and the console gaming aspect into one beautiful little beast. The Nintendo Switch.
Taking huge risks as they do.
Yeah, and when it pays off, they literally run it until it dies.
They're gonna strike out or hit a grand slam. That's just
they hit plenty of strikeouts like after the SNES.
Oh yeah.
Because as much as I love the N64, it did not sell well. As much as I love the GameCube, it did not sell well. The Wii knocked it out the park.
And I just didn't respect it as much.
No.
As I did the PS3, the Xbox 360.
Well, it's because
it
HD
was a
gaming,
kids,
dude.
It was a kids and old people's system for the longest time to me.
And
I appreciate it way more now, but the
I do too.
GameCube and the Wii were just kind of like not respected.
No. And for me, the GameCube, I still think is, to me, like one of the most underrated systems of all time.
Oh, God.
And the Wii got its adulation. It got all of its shovelware. It got all of the like accessories. It got all like the development and all that for like motion controls living on the gimmick. And then of course, then they tried to do the Wii U, which, Scott, I know you don't like hearing this, but was a failure. Sorry.
They did too. They were trying to do too much.
Well, and plus their advertising was shit. Everyone thought, oh, it's just another accessory for the Wii. Because when that's all they did since the Wii release, it's just like, oh, a new accessory. Oh, the Wii Motion Plus. Oh, it's a new accessory. Everyone thought that it was...
Konga.
Yeah, everyone thought it was going to be a new accessory. And it's like, oh, a pad that you can...
Right?
Huh?
Donkey Konga was the GameCube, right?
Yeah, and also I think they did one on the Wii as well. Keep in mind, dude, you could still play like GameCube games on the Wii.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, on the original Wii. But in terms of it, yeah, the Wii U was a failure, but then with Switch, and now I think they've shit the bed again with not announcing the Switch Pro and instead doing the Switch OLED, which everyone's talked about it, and now Steam is coming out with one. And not only that, Steam is not the only competition in town. Now
there's a bunch of them coming out.
And here's the beautiful part of it. Like, people who I paid attention to, like Inwin, they had the pocket, the one that I had, the little steelbook.
Alienware's working on one.
Alienware's working on one, and honestly, I think Valve is going to do it right, because you're not only allowed to install Steam on there, you can install other other game services. It's literally a handheld computer, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And the Inwin Pocket 2, the newer one coming out, it doesn't have the same as the Steam Deck, but it has a lot of really good stuff in it.
Isn't
and
it
also
more expensive by a decent amount?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But here's the beautiful thing about it. There's actually like these graphics card hubs that you can like plug your graphics card into, run a Thunderbolt cable out to that machine, and basically you can game like with a graphics with like a high-end graphics card. Linus did a test on it, and it's amazing.
That's crazy.
Like, Linus got a hands-on with the Steam Deck the day after they announced it, and he did like a full thing. He's like, he even brought his toolkit with him, hoping that they would give him time alone with it so that he could like take it apart, but they wouldn't allow it. He actually pulled out his toolkit as a joke for it. He's just like, I even brought my toolkit with me, hoping that they would let me break it down. And then he looks over, and then like a Steam rep is like, just like, and then he's like, but I'm putting it away. It's like, yeah, it's an awesome video. But yeah, Linus is very excited for it. I'm very excited for it. But yeah, Nintendo, whenever they hit a home run, they run it into the ground. And the Switch, I think they're going to run it into the ground. And hopefully their next console, whether it's the Switch Pro or the Switch 2 or whatever, is going to be another hit. We'll see.
We see these games appear on PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox Series X, and S, and they don't feel out of place, which is awesome. Every game on the PlayStation Store has the same worth of each other. They're all games, and the entry level of printing a game on a disc obviously was lowered, as we received so many more physical releases of smaller budget titles that normally would have been digital only. That led to more indie 2D games getting released this way. Even if it was in a limited fashion, a physical release still goes a long way in showcasing the value of said product. And with Nintendo showing there was a market for high quality 2D games on console, we've entered a bit of a 2D gaming revival renaissance within the past decade. Now, 2D Mario and Zelda can live side by side with their 3D counterparts on the same console.
Yeah.
Games like a classic 2D Mega Man get bigger budgets and physical releases compared to the Xbox Live Arcade era, where they were merely digital only. But one thing I always notice is how the value of these games always seem to be lower. Mega Man 11 was only $30, Sonic Mania was $20, yet these games are far better and gave me so much more to do than something like the Resident Evil 3 remake. So yeah, while 2D games are a bit more straightforward,
because the Resident Evil 3 remake, if they'd have taken another year to develop it, or another 18 months, it could have been equal to Resident Evil 2 remake. But no, Capcom got greedy and was just like, hey, let's push it out there unfinished with more than half of the shit missing from it. It's like 1/4 of the game that it could have been. Jesus.
I'd rather be spending that entire 5-hour playtime actually playing the game rather than for half of it watching cutscenes that are available on YouTube, or even when I am playing the game, it's literally just holding the stick up as the character's walking and talking. That's not every 3D game, believe me. I love both of these styles equally, and for how often 3D games have filler, 2D games aren't exciting and too safe. You know, it kind of balances out. But the idea that a 2D game shouldn't be priced at $60, have you seen what you're buying? How is this, and this, and this, and this worth 60? Hell, even 70? But Metroid Dread isn't worth 60. It's up to the consumer to decide how much they're willing to spend on a game. If a certain title isn't worth 60 to you, well, it isn't worth 60 to you, that's fine. But to denounce a game's price entirely based on it not having a Z-axis is a little ridiculous in my opinion.
Yeah.
2D gaming has gone from handheld only to dominating Nintendo's entire lineup to being in a great balance with 3D titles. I love I can see games from the same franchise on the same console, both released via physical media at the same price, but from two completely different dimensions.
And then I'd say, what a family reunion! Where did everybody go?
Where did everybody go? Indeed, Scott, where did everybody go? Where'd you come from, Cotton Eye Joe? Sorry.
Beautiful, dude.
Yeah, I love it when Scott does these little videos about the whole thing with like just talking about a subject matter that I like talking about and giving his take on it that is very well thought out, very well organized, and I just love it, dude. I love seeing Scott do these kinds of vids. Also, I saw here the previous one he did, Ride to Hell Retribution, which is considered the worst game of all time.
Wasn't that one like banned or something? In
certain cases, yes, but it's a thing to witness.
A cultural phenomenon.
It is. It is Tommy Wiseau's The Room of video games. I wish I were joking, but no. I wish I were joking, bro. That's just the truth. Anyway, so yeah, this was the fall and rise of 2D gaming by Scott the Woz, and yeah, he brought up a lot of good points. He did a lot of really like good comparisons between
Showed
how
some
things.
RPG footage.
Isn't that a friggin' miracle?
He's changing.
The fact that he showed Chrono Trigger, I'm like,
what?
Scott?
No Pokemon.
Well, no Pokemon, but still, it's a step in the right direction.
2D, but
yeah. No, hey, man. It is what it is. And I know that everyone's talking about like the new 3D Pokemon coming out, which we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
I'm stoked.
I am.
Say the least,
I'm stoked,
I'm
but at the same time, I'm happy. Yeah, same. It's just like me with any like new game in a series that I like. I'm just like, could this, like, if they're on a roll, I'm just like, I'm excited, but I'm just like, could this be the one where they fuck it all up?
I'm thinking
Please
about
don't let it be.
I'm thinking about doing it again. Playing Soul Silver.
Do it.
All the way through. Just
do
because,
it.
Yeah.
Have fun, dude. Enjoy it.
Well, I just realized that I could live stream it without emulating it.
Yeah.
By using my phone and just holding the fucking console underneath it.
Yeah, you can. You can.
And I can play it on the actual hardware.
Well, actually, I mean, you mean is it on the Switch or not the Switch, but the 3DS?
Yes.
Okay. Well, actually, I have a 3DS that has a capture card in it, and also there are ways for you to.
Well, the one you lent me is the one that I still have that has the plug that you said doesn't work, and I was just like, fuck it. I'll just hold it underneath the thing. I've got it working a couple times. If you get it working, awesome. But at the same time, there is software stuff that you can put out there that will actually run it out the USB cable if you plug it up to a computer. Yeah, there's stuff out there people have done now, and you can do it. Enlighten me, sir.
Well, I mean, all right, we'll go into that. I'll show you like some videos about
2D Supreme.
Yes. So thank you all very much for tuning in, and once again, Scott the Woz bringing the heat. And I'm gonna leave a like down here, and I'm also gonna leave a comment. See if y'all can find it on the original video, which is linked in the description. And if you want to see more from Scott the Woz, click his name in the title of the video. And I guess until next time, signing off. I'm Nate.
I'm Chad.
We'll see you then, everybody. Peace out.